ghoul friends, it's me, Adrian, or Ayden. Either way, I am still your host, and you are still listening to Susto, the podcast of ooky, spooky, scary stories centered on paranormal folklore from Latin American and Hispanic cultures. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me once again. And if this is your first time, we welcome you with open arms, with open lechuza wings, whatever it may be. We are happy to have you here. And I'm not sure if y'all will notice, there's been an upgrade. And if you are a Best Ghoul friend on Patreon, then you have already seen the post and you heard the mic test, my ramblings behind the scenes doing my 1-2 test. But I was recently gifted by one of my Best Ghoul friends, Lainey Hobbs. Slaney Hobbs herself gifted me a beautiful microphone that I am now using with a kind of new setup. Y'all, I don't know why. It feels like it's been longer than 2 weeks. I think maybe just because a lot has happened in the last 2 weeks. Most notably, Susto is now officially part of the Spreaker Prime network, and I am so excited to be joined by them. It's just opening many more opportunities for me. And so again, I think I mentioned it last time, Susto is always evolving, but this felt like one of the next kind of big steps that was happening. So very, very excited about that. As far as updates go, I think I have one main one. The Susto will be participating in the Spirit Social hosted by the Night Owl podcast. I will be there along with many other amazing paranormal creators. I will be sitting on a panel, and I will also be tabling. That's going to be on October 12th at the Ballroom in Austin, Texas. You can learn more by visiting the nightowlpodcast.com to get your tickets to see what's going to be happening there. It's going to be an amazing time. And yeah, I'm so excited. If you're following me on social media, that's at Susto Podcast on every platform. I will have posted about it already. Also recently, if you're following on socials or if you visit the website sustopodcast.com, you'll see that I uploaded some photos from my surprise appearance at the Paranormal Puta's Lechuza presentation at We Love Video here in Austin. Of course, they did an amazing time and they were so kind and welcoming to have me do a surprise addition to their presentation. So that was really fun. I got to do a live story and do like a mini discussion, and it was just so much fun just hanging out with everybody, taking pictures, talking about spooky stuff as we do. So yeah, just tons of fun. But all that aside, make sure to follow online for any and all updates on the show. Regular house cleaning stuff. If you have your own scary story that you would like to send to me, you already know how to do that. Email, review, comment, DM, the website, or speaking of the website, there is a new way to send your stories in, and I'm working with some people right now to get the first of its kind on Susto, an episode out of people sharing their own stories with their own voice. So if you visit sustopodcast.com, on the right side of the page, there's going to be a little microphone that says something along the lines of send me a voicemail or something. If you tap on that, you can record your own voicemail and send me your story. So please do not be shy. Feel free to send those in. I would love to hear your story in your own words, in your own voice, if you would like to. Again, it's just another option, but if you would prefer to write it in, you can still do that. And of course, it's not limited to stories. You can also send in photos, videos, audio recordings, anything. Send me that spooky stuff. You know I live for it. With that being said, we are going to jump into today's episode. This is going to be the final installment of the curanderismo series. I really hope that you all enjoyed it. I had such a fun time making it, and I feel like I learned so much. And this last installment is I'm going to be telling the story of one Ruperta Estrada Durazno, and this was sent in by her great maternal granddaughter, Cristina de Leon Perales. Cristina, thank you so much for sending this in. It was so much fun to look into. This was so cool to get a submission about this from someone that has truly a personal connection to it. So I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that I did Ruperta justice. And without further ado, let's jump into her story.
Hey, what's up? I'm Charlie.
And I'm Tyler.
And we are Believing the Bizarre,
a paranormal podcast that dives into the unknown and the unusual every Tuesday.
We discuss hauntings, cryptids, aliens, UFO encounters, conspiracies, and more.
And we break down whether or not we find them believable.
All right, listen, if you're not paying for electricity, you're not paying for dinner.
Saw a terrifying looking face pressed to the window with gaping eyes.
Almost reached it when the laughter stopped suddenly, and a sound behind me made me turn around.
Sorry, I was gonna do it, but then I had SpaceX.
So we got you covered, whether you like horror or laughs, or both. We actually really hope it's both.
With over 3 million downloads, you'll be joining a bizarro community that we promise is more than just Mothman and our parents.
We even take creepy stories from our listeners and turn them into episodes.
Check out Believing the Bizarre on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Believing the Bizarre, a podcast as bizarre as you are.
One Ruperta Estrada Durazno, who lived to be 120 years of age and a possible descendant of the Otomi Chichimeca people who populated Querétaro, long knew of the healing herbs and mysterious plants that came from nature's pharmacopoeia in southwest Texas. Ruperta's home was in Karnes County, and despite her age, she visited her adopted daughter in San Antonio occasionally. Well into her later years, she was in full possession of her faculties, marvelously keen in her perception of people as of the plants she had an intimate understanding of for nearly a century. Her farm, half a mile west of Kennedy, was the source of herb products for a local store on the west side, and where some of the Mexican population bought its herbs and roots to brew concoctions endowed with healing magic. In the springtime especially was a demand for these herb medicines, which were parceled out with precise neatness in their respective bundles. In 1922, Estrada built a frame schoolhouse near her homestead in the little settlement of Choate, Texas, big enough for a small class of children. In one season, there were 97 of them. The centenarian knew war. She told of having been with her husband for 3 months once in an army camp near Querétaro in 1877, 10 years after the execution of the abandoned French Emperor Maximilian. Telling the tale, she lights a cigarette for solace during the recollection of things which happened half a century ago. They are of small importance compared with the astonishing fact that she, who never was ill in her life, at the time of this article was actually a patient and obliged to take doctor's medicine. Her friends were faithful in this. One of them administered the doses, smiling at her disgusted obedience. Her hair, once so luxuriant, betrayed its owner's age, but that did not slow her down, or her clear speech, her direct glance, and acute hearing, which were said to be marvelous even in her late years. My grandmother taught me all I know about herbs, she said, and described the plants she grew. Rosemary, a disinfectant, capitana for ointment, fennel, mustard, blackberry, a favorite household remedy in summer. Fruit, leaves, and root are all employed for glucose, gallic, and tannic acid. Huizache blossoms, mints, parsley, and cactus juice. The nopal or pear itself, designed apparently by nature to furnish a convenient poultice when split. Among them all and many more, Ruperta, by keen, accustomed eye, by touch of hands, by quick inhalation, tested them all, recited their uses like a rosary of healing. Of course, each countryside has its folk medicine, but this San Antonio region inherits rich medical lore from several sources. The tribes who lived in villages or ranged the valleys of the San Antonio, Guadalupe, Comal, and Pedernales contributed something, but the Aztec descendants brought with them on this subtropical soil quite definite knowledge of its shrubs and herbs, which were closely akin to those of Mexico. Long had their ancestors practiced the healing art of nature. Welcome back, little friends. Okay, so this one is a much shorter entry, and the source that I used for the story itself is actually an article from the San Antonio Express, which was published in June of 1925. And I did the math. So at the time of writing this article, Ruperta was 107, I believe. That means that she would have been born in 1818. And again, she lived to be 120 years old. So that alone is, I mean, what an accomplishment, what a feat, what a gift to live that many years, especially because it was said that she had so much life left in her later years. Unfortunately, this was the only real, I guess, source, or honestly, it was the only thing that I could find, was this article that Christina sent to me. I tried Googling and I tried different formats and I tried her name different ways, but it was so hard to find anything about her. So while we have this amazing article written about her and her work and her knowledge as an herbalist, there's still a lot of mystery surrounding her, and I wish I knew more. Christina, thank you so much for sending this in, and I know that, you kind of asked for some help looking into her more, and unfortunately I met a lot of dead ends, and I wish that there was more information about her. I'm going to keep looking because I do want to know more about her. Aside from that, there is also an obituary. This is from, I believe, it looks like this is from 1935. So redoing the math, she may have been born in 1815, even earlier. But this is a quick obituary entry, and there's a photo of her here that I will be uploading as well. The obituary says, oldest person in the United States is dead at 120 years of age. So at one point, Ruperta held this title that she was the oldest person in the United States. And it's a short obituary, and I'm going to read it verbatim. And this says, San Antonio, Texas, March 30th. Mrs. Ruperta Estrada Durazno, reported to be 120 years old and believed to be the oldest person in the United States, died in a hospital here today. Mrs. Durazno, who witnessed Maximilian's invasion of Mexico, succumbed to an attack of pneumonia. Mrs. Durazno was a full-blooded Indian and did not learn to speak Spanish until 45 years of age. This was during the reign of Maximilian, when she and her husband, who was an army officer, went to live in Mexico City, where her husband was military attaché. She came to the United States in 1909 and lived at Kennedy, Texas ever since. I believe, and again, I don't have any solid sources, I was seeing little bits and pieces of stuff. It could have been talking about someone else. So I did see something else that I'm not going to quote as a true source, but it was a possible lead that said that she was originally from Honduras. But also this article from the San Antonio Express is saying that she's a descendant of the indigenous people from Querétaro, which, as we know, many of these stories and many of these people, they moved through the land, right? So yeah, I'm not exactly sure where this Honduras bit came from, but it was something that I saw online that the timeline kind of matched up, but again, I'm not very sure. I wish there was more that I had about her. But in kind of wrapping up this curanderismo series, I did also want to talk about modern curanderismo. It's something that I touched on quickly at the very beginning of this series, but I think it'd be a nice way to kind of wrap it all up. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is from a website called the Zoe Report. And this was published in February of 2024, so extremely recently, and it's titled The Ancient Practice of Curanderismo is Getting a Modern Makeover. This is a really great write-up, but one piece of it that I thought was interesting is this part that says, Dr. Jennifer Semen, author of Borderlands Curanderos, describes curanderismo as a hybrid system of healing practiced throughout Mexico and Latin America, and in places where ethnic Mexicans and Latina people have a strong presence, such as the US-Mexico borderlands. As someone who's from the borderlands, I feel like I can tell you that is extremely true. And I'm going to talk a little bit in a while about how modern curanderismo may present itself. So just kind of keep that in mind. But this continues, encompassing a vast range of techniques. It is an earth-based spiritual healing practice comprised of a set of folk medical beliefs, indigenous and Catholic rituals, and practices that address the psychological, spiritual, social, and health needs of people, Semen tells TZR. Again, that I think really perfectly encapsulates some of the things that I learned throughout this series. So one of them being that, as we saw with everybody that we spoke about, and I wouldn't be surprised if it also applied to Ruperta, was with Don Pedro Jaramillo, Teresa Urrea, El Niño Fidencio, is they were all not only spiritual healers, so they helped people with spiritual elements, with physical elements, but they were also kind of activists in their own right. And I know I talked a lot about this when we talked about Teresa Urrea, but again, they were so involved with the community. They were so concerned with giving back to and helping the communities that they were in. Again, Don Pedro Jaramillo providing food to hundreds of people that went to visit him and in that county. Teresa Urrea speaking out for basically as part of the land back movement and saying that indigenous people are entitled to their lands. And not only that, but she was also a big advocate for labor rights and for the rights of women. And then Niño Fidencio, he was also very involved in giving back to the community. It was very interesting that like holistic healing, it really, based on what I've, again, this is my opinion, but based on what I've like read and what I've seen throughout the series, is holistic healing doesn't stop at the individual level. It involves the entire community, and it involves the health and the well-being of the community, not only physically and spiritually, but as a functioning society. And so it's like, how do you expect people, and this was part of the work that I did when I worked at the clinics and working with different kinds of populations, is how do you expect someone to care for their health? How do you expect someone to make it to their doctor's appointments every single time when they don't know where they're going to sleep, when they don't know where their next meal is going to come from, when they don't know if they will be able to take their kids to school the next day? You know, it's, these needs need to be addressed at a basic social level for people not only to care, but to even attempt to take action on their health. That's why, I don't know, I feel so like galvanized about all of these people, these famous curanderas. And it again took me back to that space of when I used to do a lot of that kind of work. But we'll continue so that I'm not just on my soapbox for this whole episode. I'm going to read one more thing from this entry, the zoereport.com. Originally known as the art of Mexican folk healing, modern curanderismo is composed heavily of a synthesis of cultures, particularly that of Mayans and Aztecs, as a result of colonization. Quote, in the Americas, Seman notes, curanderismo emerged from the contact between the old and the new worlds, that is, between Europe and the indigenous empires of the Americas. Additionally, she notes, the forced adaptation and assimilation during the 16th century on the American continents led to a syncretic healing practice now known as curanderismo. Okay, I'm so happy that they included this because I was going to bring that up. I was thinking about it as I read it. This line, it says, the forced adaptation and assimilation during the 16th century. Again, forced adaptation and assimilation. I've talked about this before, but the idea of modern curanderismo or even modern brujeria is you see a lot of Catholic iconography or even ritual or language folded into this. And then you wonder, why is that there? Why are they incorporating it? If the other part of this practice is based in indigenous traditions or just not Catholic traditions. But again, because there was the people who were practicing this, people indigenous to Mexico, indigenous to America, they had to, in order to survive, they basically, you know, had no other choice but to accept those aspects of this religion that was being forced upon them in order for them not only to physically survive, but for the culture to survive. So in a way, this assimilation, this adaptation, this merging of those two religions and practices, it had to happen in order for any of it to survive, like a necessary evil, I guess you could say. So yeah, it's just an interesting point that I always try to keep in mind when I'm talking about this, and I'm so happy that they included it in this article as well. So this next source that I want to read out is from KUNM, I believe that's a radio station for the University of New Mexico. This was written in 2014, and it says, Professor Torres has been teaching curanderismo courses for 14 years now, since before the World Health Organization endorsed traditional medicine as a part of national healthcare systems about a decade ago, which would make it 2004. He says the tradition was being lost in the United States, but because it's being researched now, people know more about it than at any other time. And you know what? I'm happy to contribute to that in any way that I can. This continues, quote, we're beginning to see another type of curandere, he said. Maybe they're not called curanderes, but they know the traditions and they know the proper ways of working with curanderismo. Torres gets treatments from these healers and participates in ceremonies to deal with aches and pains, and he takes herbal medications for minor ailments. However, if I'm really sick, I rush to the hospital or to my physician, he said. So you are able to use good judgment on whether you want to use traditional medicine or allopathic medicine. Many physicians take his course and have an open mind about curanderismo. That's my favorite part of this one, is that there are physicians who are open to these practices, to these beliefs, because they are real and they apply. And it's unfortunate, you know, I have definitely come across doctors and I have to go to doctors for my chronic illness. And unfortunately, I have come across some doctors that are, one in particular, but I won't say his name, who are extremely closed-minded and who are actually bigoted. Okay, I'm getting too personal now. I'm getting heated. And that's kind of scary. That was scary to me at the time more than anything, because these are the people that I am supposed to go to with full trust for my health, for my well-being. And they are supposed to know these things. To see that side of a medical professional, and again, this does not apply, of course, to all, hashtag not all doctors, right? But this was my encounter with these two. And I know that it's not an isolated incident. I have heard other encounters with other doctors that are really just unfortunate. You know, people that are completely closed off to people's beliefs. And it goes back, I think, to something that I mentioned in the introduction of this series is healthcare should be culturally relevant. And what that means is that whoever's providing the healthcare, when they are being culturally relevant, they are considering the perspective and the close held beliefs of the patients. Because if you cannot gain the trust of your patient, if you cannot meet them where they're at, especially with something that is valid like herbalism, you know, there are uses for certain herbs and plants. And if you can't meet people there when they are there, then that shouldn't be your patient. You know, that's not the patient for you. It's not always going to be a fit. But then also at the same time, doctors should not demand for their patients to let go of those beliefs simply because I am the one with the prescription pad. I am the one with all these years of education, which again are all valuable. I don't want to piss any doctors off, but that should not give a medical professional the right to invalidate someone's beliefs and experiences, is where I will leave that one. So thank you to this Professor Torres for doing that work and working with physicians and medical professionals to help them kind of open their minds to this form of healing. So the next source that I have is from a 4directionswellness.com, and this does not have a published date that I can find, but a short entry from here that I wanted to read out. It says, in Dr. Cheo Torres's TEDx ABQ, Connecting Modern Medicine to Traditional Healing, Dr. Cheo Torres at TEDx ABQ, he reminisces about his mother's home remedies that stemmed from curanderismo, but more powerfully, he goes on to explain the power of curanderismo when combined with the understanding of modern medicine today. In his integrative medicine approach, a new generation of curanderas are being trained at community centers in Mexico to help tackle the difficult issues of providing quality, affordable healthcare. So again, I think that experience that this Dr. Cheo Torres is talking about in his TEDx talk is it's kind of echoing what I just kind of ranted about, right? Is that this integrative approach to medicine is important, and considering, you know, the quote modern and the traditional. And yeah, I just thought it was important to include that. I have not watched this TEDx video, but I'm very excited to watch it. And if you would like to watch it again, this is on 4directionswellness.com. Curanderismo, the traditional healing of Mexican culture. But the video itself is Connecting Modern Medicine to Traditional Healing, Dr. Cheo Torres at TEDx ABQ. The final source that I have here, this is from the Institute for Latino Studies from the University of Notre Dame Student Research Briefs. And this is a really cool brief, I guess, that was put together. But I want to read through, it's broken down in a really neat table of contents. And they do have something here called Modern Curanderismo in the US. So of course I have to read that, right? So I'm just going to read a bit from here. And it says, Curanderismo is alive and growing amongst Latina populations in the United States. Components of the folk healing practice are intertwined into the culture of Latinas and are ingrained in Latina immigrants' daily lives. Because the practice allows immigrants to maintain elements of their culture and their beliefs and identities, curanderismo continues to be passed down and cherished as it provides psychological and social support to immigrants who have been isolated from their cultural practices of origin. Curanderismo persists because it provides a form of healthcare to a medically underserved demographic. Latinos are subject to significant healthcare disparities in the United States. Regardless of immigration status, Latinas are the least likely demographic to have health insurance in the United States and are, quote, locked out of the U.S. healthcare system due to factors including language barriers, lack of Latina healthcare providers, documentation status, and socioeconomic factors. Blocked from the U.S. healthcare system, many Latina immigrants return to their cultural place of healing for treatments, which explains why, quote, traditional medicine is used by 75% of Mexican Americans in some parts of the United States. Curanderas meet the medical needs of Latinas who have little access to the public healthcare system in the US, especially given that in their communities, a botanica or healer may be more accessible than a doctor's office or a pharmacy. Again, just echoing all of that stuff and this is again taking me back to the work that I did in the clinics. For anybody who doesn't know the work that I used to do, or if I've never said it before, I used to work in an HIV clinic. I think more formally, they're known as AIDS service organizations. And I was a community tester, and I would test people for HIV and STIs. And I was also responsible for doing presentations in the community to teach people about HIV, how to prevent it, what it is to live with HIV in this day and age. One of the saddest things, and one of the most upsetting things, to be honest, and it mentioned it here as one of the barriers to healthcare, is documentation status. I came across so many people that did not want to come into our clinic or did not want to take a test because they were scared to be deported because they were undocumented. And they were just worried about what we as a state-funded organization would do with their information. And so it took a lot of convincing people this is a safe space to get healthcare services relating to HIV and STIs, and that no harm would come to them from getting those services. And again, I'm speaking to my own experience. This is the modicum of involvement. This is the little bit of involvement that I had in the healthcare industry, was doing that work. And because we would hear from clients, that was a huge concern, is they were not only avoiding us, but they were avoiding any doctor's office because they were scared, basically. That's so fucked up. So upsetting. It's so sad. I don't know what the numbers are now. I have since left the quote HIV industry just to kind of take care of my own mental health. As someone living with HIV, it was also very hard to do that work day in and day out. But at the time, I remember that the Latina population was adversely affected by HIV transmission. We were one of the highest populations that are affected by HIV. And a lot of that was, again, like this brief just stated, was due to the fact that there were so many barriers to healthcare. And this is where that social aspect comes in, because there's no plant, there's no tea, as far as I know of, that I can take to manage my HIV. I have to take medicine, but I would not be able to get there if I did not have all these if I wasn't comfortable going to a doctor's office. So I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of rambling, but hopefully you can see the connection that I'm trying to make, is that when people are, again, met where they're at, when the healthcare is being provided in a way that is making the patient comfortable and the patient feel comfortable and seen, then, their health can and will improve. Hopefully that wasn't a huge roundabout circle way, but for me, it made a connection in my head, and I hope that you can see it too, because all of this is connected in a way. I truly believe that, not only on a metaphysical level, but it's like a domino effect. If one thing happens, something else down the line, it's going to be connected in some sort of way. So I'll just leave that there before I continue to ramble and rant. One last thing I did want to mention about modern curanderismo, that I almost forgot about, was the way that it kind of presents itself now. Then I think, just because of the way communication has evolved, then we had these pillars, right, in their community, these absolute pillars that stood out. And that could also just be a testament to the efficacy of their healing, to how much they were able to actually heal and what they were able to do in their communities. But also, I think with the changing of communication, look at us now, you and me right here. The way that I'm speaking to you, the way that you're listening, the way that you may later go on to send me a DM or a comment or an email or whatever. It's just such an open form of communication. We are open to communicate with each other, and sometimes at very large levels. Gratefully, I've built this kind of platform with Susto, and so I'm able to share all of this information. So I think if we apply that to people doing curanderismo, if you do a search now for a curandere in your area, then I'm sure you're going to get countless results are going to pop up. And it's kind of it's an image I have in my head of driving through where I'm originally from the Rio Grande Valley, driving through, and even in Austin, I think anywhere there's a Latina population, you're going to see it. If you drive through the community, you're going to see the signs. You're going to see the yerberias spelled with a Y, or a botanica, or you might even see someone just full out with a sign that says curandera, curandero, curanderismo, negocio de curandero. You're going to see that these services are out there. I think because people have learned also how to I'm going to use the word advertise or market themselves, which also I think can be good because now it's like you don't have to travel like people had to do in the times of Don Pedro Jaramillo, Teresa Urrea, El Niño Fidencio, Ruperta. Like people don't have to travel sometimes hundreds of miles to go get this kind of care and attention. You can drive down the block in your town, in your neighborhood, and visit your local curandera who can help you out. And I think that's great. I think it makes it more accessible. But again, just pointing out the idea of like how communication has spread, because not only are those people in the community, but you can also find them and you can do the research beforehand and say, okay, if I go here, no, actually she's a partera. That's the kind of work she focuses on. I don't want that. I need a huesero because I'm having an issue with my elbow or my knee, or I need a sobadora, or I need to go to a yerberia or a yerbera so that they can make me a tea for whatever this ailment is. You know, you can, and people can, again, advertise themselves as in a certain way and say, this is the kind of work that I do, or I provide all these services, this is my focus, or if you need a combination of these things, and you can find the right person. Honestly, if we could make a ZocDoc for curanderas, that would be amazing. I don't know. I've never used ZocDoc, but I've heard of them. This is not sponsored, by the way, so don't use them until they sponsor me. But wouldn't it be cool to get that? You know what? I'm onto something. If there's any app developers on there, copyright, trademark, I'm doing it now. Let's make an app for curanderas to sign up on there, and you can find the right curandera for you using code SUSTO for 0% off. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting point to bring up as well, because we are, you know, we're in it now. We're in the generation of now of the internet, and where we have access to anything immediately just at our fingertips, and I think that can be pretty cool. Welcome back, Wolf friends. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope that I was able to wrap a nice, neat little bow on this curanderismo series. Honestly, if there was anyone that I missed, anyone that you think should have been featured, anyone that you know of personally or just may have heard of, please send them in, and I would love to feature them again in another episode. Yeah, because these were the ones that I went over. They were just the first ones that kind of popped up, or they were repeatedly showing up. But I know that it's not limited to just those three, and also to Cristina and your great grandmother. Thank you for sending that story in. It was so cool to see that someone who listens to Susto has this personal connection to a curandera in their life. And I'm sure many of you do. Again, thank you so much for listening. And as always, if you have your own story, photo, video, audio recording, anything, send it to me via the website, email, DM, comment, review. You can now also send in audio recordings on the website. That's sustopodcast.com. Remember to follow on social media for any and all updates on the show. That's at Susto Podcast on every platform. Oh, also, before I forget, I will be appearing on the True Scary Story podcast. I'll put a link to that, of course, when it comes up, so that y'all can listen to me on there, or you can visit them and listen before, because it's a great show. So I'm very excited about that. I told a story that I think I've mentioned on here before, but I told it in full detail on their show. So I'm very excited for that to be out there. And as always, the easiest way to support the show is by engaging with it wherever you are listening, sharing it, subscribing, liking, reviewing it, rating it, whatever it is. More than anything, sharing it with your own network of ghoul friends. It means the world to me. Speaking of support, if you would like to support monetarily, you can always sign up for the Patreon. That's patreon.com/sustopodcast, where if you sign up to be a paid subscriber, it comes with benefits, including but not limited to early and ad-free listening. So if you are a Patreon subscriber on any paid level, then you got to listen to this episode with no ads or interruptions. And while we are on the subject of Patreon, thank you so much to my Patreon subscribers. You are Liza, Sadie, Rachel, Alejandra, Luther, April, Mario, Eva. What if I sang it to you this time? Okay, paid Patreon subscribers, thank you so much for your support. You are Liza, Sadie, Rachel, Alejandra, Luther, April, Mario, Eva, DJ. Okay, I can't. I'm sorry. D. Josette, Sam, Angela and Co, Mandy, Jules, Lori, Jeannie, Desiree, Anna, Ashes, Neressa, Rachel, Azucena, Rios, Anna, Marlene, Chata, Lainey, Desiree, Aaliyah, Cynthia, Serena y Flamenca, Lupe, Belinda, Isaiah, and Archie. Thank you all so much. If I didn't sing your name and you really wanted me to sing your name, let me know, and I will do that for you. I knew halfway through that I was going to absolutely cringe hearing myself try and do that. Thank you all so much. I deeply appreciate your support. I will talk to you in the next episode, and until then, no te asustes. Bye.